3 Gold and Black Live. Now, I know that when Kelsey Dawson on the far right, Brad next to me, woke up this morning, this is the thing you were looking most forward to. It's going to Gold and Black. But we thank you for taking the time. I've really been looking forward to these segments because these two folks are sports psychologists, and it's a big job for any student at Purdue University, let alone in the world of college sports. And I think, and I read, there's going to be an article in Forge that Tom Dienhart wrote regarding what you guys are trying to get done. But I think one of the things that you talked about early on, I'll start with you, Brad, is that every day is different. You've got clients, people that you're talking to, student athletes. Every problem is and every challenge is there's nothing that's 2 days are the same, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, so one day we might be just sitting in the office all day and it's just student after student after student. Next day we might be spending more time at practices or visiting with other staff in the department, consulting with our coaching staffs, helping folks navigate some of the mental health related things their athletes are dealing with, but also how to help their team with performance as part of that. And Kelsey will talk a little bit about that too, I imagine. She works with our men's basketball team a little bit more directly, so her days look even different than mine, which is actually probably my favorite part of my job. I love working with our student athletes, and I love helping these people succeed and grow, but also I'm not just doing one thing every day where I'm just staring at a computer screen. I'm actually getting to engage and work with people, so I love it.
Yeah, and I should have probably started with this, but Kelsey, take me through a little bit of your background and your role, because that was a big reason why you were brought here, was with men's basketball, and then I'll go back to Brad and let you talk as well.
Yeah, so I'm from Ohio originally. I actually was a student athlete. I went to Ohio State, so that's kind of where I learned about sports psychology and fell in love with it.
Which sport?
I swam.
Okay.
Yeah. And then from there went on to grad school, got my degree from Wright State. But throughout my training, I worked with student athletes at Ohio State, Wright State, and then most recently I was down at the University of Oklahoma, and then I came to Purdue from there. So just good amount of training within sports psychology, got to work with a wide array of teams and different athletes, which was really helpful coming in here, just because there are so many sports and being able to work with a lot of different teams.
And Brad, in your background before you came here as well.
Sure. So I'm also from up in Northeast Ohio. I'm in a much smaller place than she's from. I went to school for my bachelor's degree in psychology at Kent State University. From there, I went to that school down the road, IU, to get my master's and got my PhD there in counseling psychology. That's where I started specializing in sport and performance. A little bit similar route. I then went to, I jumped around a little bit.
Yeah.
So I went to the University of Oklahoma for an internship. Went to Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville for a postdoc, went back to University of Oklahoma where I was the assistant director there as part of their sports psychology program. I took a stop at Georgetown University as their director of sports psychology before they came and nabbed me here to come to West Lafayette.
Kelsey, for you, I'll start with you. Was it psychology or sports psychology? I mean, did you look at it because you competed at that level, you saw that need as a student athlete, or I mean, how did you jump into this?
Yeah, I always knew I wanted to do psychology, something within that field, and then I started seeing the sports psychologist when I was in college, and I found him to be really helpful. And then I saw a bunch of my teammates work through some pretty serious mental health concerns at the time too. And so being able to see their progression and just how helpful it was, combined sports and then psychology together. And I was like, I don't have to leave like sports once I graduate and I'm done competing. So it was a nice blend of the two to still really be involved and then be in the field that I love.
How about you, Brad, on that front? I mean, in terms of which came first for you, was it always this? Did you always know that angle in sports was going to be a part of this, or not?
No, I actually didn't know it was even a career until I started graduate school. So when I was an undergrad, I wanted to be a pediatrician, and then just kind of navigated my way to psychology. That was the area that I was most interested in. And then I got to grad school, thought I was going to be a family therapist. And then just happened to be lucky enough that we had Dr. Steinfeld, a professor who started there at IU, started a sports psychology program within the counseling program. We had Dr. Carr, who works with the Pacers and a few other teams here in the area. He was there at IU at the same time, so it was just luck that I found out that, I can do this. This is a thing that you can actually do. And I was able to just get my foot in the door there. And so after that, I discovered it's much more fun than some of the other areas, and I love the environment and the culture of it. So it was more of a luck of the draw kind of thing for me.
You know, Kelsey, from a layperson's perspective, I maybe pigeonholing, but I say, all right, these student athletes are extremely competitive people by probably, they wouldn't get to where they are, but how have you worked to break down the barrier of, or the stigma of mental health and the fact that these are people that are used to doing things for themselves, and now they need help in something that's maybe is not as concrete as an injury, as a physical injury. How does that, what strategies make that work for you?
I'd say the number one thing is being at practices. We really try
it's
and
interesting.
carve out some time to be around there. That way it's not like, oh, the doctor's here, but it's just, we're just another person that's
Yeah.
helpful. And I'd say that's probably number one, trying to do some programming. We, at the start of the school year, did one about just how to manage stress, how to view it in a different way. We were blown away with how many student athletes showed up, because we were like, oh, 20, 30, like for
Yeah.
other presentations we've given at other places we've worked, over 100. It was, people were sitting on the ground. So it's also nice because just across the board within the athletics department, our roles are really well appreciated too. So from the athletic trainers, coaches, even admin staff, everyone's really supportive and on board and helpful of like, you need some help, go see them. They're awesome, they're really helpful. So just even word of mouth has been pretty big for us too.
Yeah, and that, Brad, and obviously, we don't ask specifics, but we talk about, from a general standpoint, when you see a student athlete for the first time, is there a pattern they follow in terms of what their needs are? Is there a barrier that you have to kind of get through to get the process going? How does that typically work from your standpoint?
I would say there's not really a pattern. It really varies from person to person. So you can't ever really come in expecting, oh, this is going to be about performance. I even have student athletes who they're maybe referred by a coach that says like, hey, can you help so-and-so with performance? And we get in and the reason they're not performing is something not related to their sport at all. And so we focus a lot on nothing related to sport that you'd think. Maybe it's just dealing with family issues, roommate issues, things like that. So part of it is you can't go into any expectation of it. The other part, I think part of the training we have and the experience we have is to try to learn how to help people become comfortable in the environment of, it's not the most natural thing to sit down with somebody you just met and then kind of pour yourself out. But I think as psychologists, one of the things we really work on is how to make people feel comfortable, connect with them, hopefully help them feel that we're empathic to their needs and what they're going through and get them in a place where they're warm enough to actually share what's really going on. But I mean, there's people that it takes a little while. I mean, and that's a very normal thing. I've had students where 10 appointments in where they open up about something that I never knew about that changes everything that we were working on and the way we're sort of putting it all together. So it really is person to person. I have some people come in, and you can probably speak to this too, who they will tell you everything right up front without even having to ask a question.
Yeah.
I've had appointments where I sat there for 40 minutes silently as they just shared everything that I could have ever asked. Other times it's really I have to find a way to make them feel comfortable and connect with them.
And Kelsey, when you watch, and you obviously deal with other sports, but you're doing a lot with men's basketball, is it a case where you might, if when you're at practice and you see something, is it a case where you may initiate some discussion if you see something, or is this a situation where it usually comes to you?
When I'm at practices and or games or meets,
Yeah.
like for any sport, a lot of it's just observation.
Yeah.
Seeing kind of what the culture's like, what are interactions like, how are people managing just even the pressures or stress of practice or certain drills. It's helpful to know, like, if I'm working with anyone individually, I can see maybe if they are using some skills that we've talked about, whether that's checking out their body language or facial expressions, how they're interacting with other people. So a lot of it's just mental note-taking. For later on, if I do any team sessions or work with them individually, then I have a good reference point of either, hey, I saw you doing this, or it may give me ideas for good team programming to do. If like this situation came up and a lot of people were struggling with it, let's work on this mental skill.
Yeah, I think one of the things, Brad, that I think is the difference between performance and then the more of the therapeutic or more of helping them work through their own personal problems or personal challenges. Is there a breakdown in terms of how many people come with a performance-related issue? I mean, I again overly simplify somebody that can't make a 3-foot putt and they're trying to get over that mental or having trouble shooting free throws. Do you get a lot of that, or is that a big part of what you do, or is there a way to assign a percentage? Well, I get half of my folks I talk to have that situation.
Sure, I don't think we have like real firm direct stats on that. I mean,
Yeah.
it kind of varies from semester to semester or week to week. I usually tell people that it breaks down usually somewhere like 80-90% is more mental health focused, where maybe another 10-20% is more performance only. Realistically, though, very few of the times do I work with somebody for something as performance that doesn't sort of interact with their daily personal life. And I try to help our student athletes recognize that performance, everything's in a performance in their life, whether it's in classwork, whether it's in relationships and building relationships with a significant other or with friends. Understanding how to communicate and respond. I mean, it's no different than in their sport of how to respond to a situation or a circumstance. So I think it's not so divisive. It's not really broken up that well.
Yeah.
Once in a great while, somebody comes in and says, I need to work on my ability to focus like on a putt.
Yeah.
And we'll just train that skill and then they're out the door, but that's pretty rare compared to some of the other things.
And you have, and I think one of the things that's really interesting is the fact that, you've got all different kinds of issues, you've got all different kinds of backgrounds, so you bring, there is no tablet, there is nothing really to draw from, and you deal with it from that standpoint. Social media, and the wonderful world of social media, that can cause, even in our businesses, from my old person's perspective, I don't know how the kids today handle this. What's the message in terms of, are a lot of discussions about that, or is that an offshoot to it, and I'll start with you, Kelsey, on that. What do you think?
It's something that's definitely coming up more and more. I can think back, and that's been a learning curve for me because I really did not have to deal with that in college. And so, but now it's so much more prevalent, and people get pretty bold on social media too. And so,
Unbelievably.
Talking to just students of like how to manage that. I've had student athletes that just need to take social media off during season or maybe during tournament time or things like that, because some of the feedback can be pretty critical, especially if they're struggling with something at that point. So we talk about ways to set boundaries with it and just interact with it in a more healthy manner. But realistically, we also know like we're not going to get student athletes to completely shut off their phones and never be on it. So also finding ways to engage with them and their phones in a helpful way too, using technology kind of to our advantage.
Brad, is there research that would indicate that it might be better that they all shut it all down? I mean, there are some teams some programs where that happens. It depends on coaches, but but it is a fact of life. It is in kids' wheelhouse on a daily basis. I mean, how do you view that?
It's still, the research side of things, it's growing. We're learning more about it and trying to understand what's good and what's not, what's helpful, what's not. And I think it's not black and white necessarily, the impact it can have on people. With us, we talk a little bit about, how people come to value themselves and what their identity is developed in. That's a big part of what we do is working on identity development with our young men and women. And part of their identity now is connected with social media. Part of their value of themselves sometimes can be tied with number of likes or what people think of them on social media. So I think that's partly of helping them develop an identity that feels maybe a little bit more disconnected, so they feel less of a need for it. We also, though, we had a question not that long ago at a different meeting we had, and somebody asked, what's happening now that all of these mental health issues are happening for student athletes? And my response to them is that these things have existed. This isn't a new thing where student athletes have been experiencing stress and anxiety and all these different things. One, we're more aware of it, but our student athletes now also have new stressors that no one has ever experienced before. A student athlete 20 years ago didn't have to worry about if they posted something, who might see it or who might get in trouble for it. Or I was even thinking about, an athlete who, when I was at the University of Oklahoma, one of our high-profile athletes happened to post where he was eating lunch and all of a sudden was swarmed by it, where maybe he could have flown under the radar and not dealt with that sort of in the limelight all the time kind of experience. So I think it's a reality that I don't think it's healthy to dismiss it for them because it's part of their life, but helping them navigate of how do I make this not be such a prominent part of who I am, make it just a piece of what I like to do or a way it can connect me with other people. That's a big challenge that we're always trying to tackle, and we're still working on it. It's still a work in progress for us to figure out how best to use it to help to either separate them, but also how to help them, as Kelsey said, how do we have the thing that's in their hand all the time be a tool, not just something we think of as a problem.
Yeah. I just, from my perspective, it's so hard. There's so much in this world today that we're all trying to navigate through, that it's all in your face. And how do you get them to take a deep breath, though? And is that a constant reminder? When you talk to them, hey, it's okay to be who you are or what you are. Is that the first and foremost lesson, or what? I guess it depends on the case, but that to me seems to be a big part of this.
It's really important, and I think that's kind of what's helpful about the space we provide is just having that moment where they can be validated
Yeah.
for how they're feeling, and just letting them know like it's completely okay to feel how you're feeling, and we can kind of work on that, improve things that you want to improve upon.
I don't know how much in both of your, and I'm sure you've had experience, but the psychology of fans and the one, again, because they're getting feedback in any sport, that there's going to be, whether it's a tennis match or where you may have a handful of people there, or you're going to have 60,000 people at a football game. That feedback, is that are student athletes tend to be ones that love that limelight, or do you get some that, that presents a whole level or a different fear for them? I mean, how does that play into how fans interact with them, and what that message needs to be to the student athlete about that?
Sure. I don't know if I've met too many student athletes who have said they love all of that attention.
Yeah.
I think they came to Purdue or whatever school they went to because they love their sport, they want to get an education, they love the school, all these other pieces and parts of it. I think there's probably student athletes who like that, enjoy that sort of atmosphere. I think every one of our basketball players will tell you they love having, Mackey full
Yeah.
with, a crowd and the energy that comes with it. I think for me, the thing I would like to see is just more fans to recognize that these are 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-olds.
Me too.
And I'm not going to disclose anything on TV or anything, but I know when I was 18, there's plenty of things that I wish people wouldn't have known, or I don't want to happen in front of people, and things that, mistakes that get made. And so I think people forget now, as we've the media and the way we look at sports has grown over time, that these aren't professional athletes. They're young men and women trying to discover who they are, trying to hopefully achieve something great or make themselves the best version of themselves they can be. And they just happen to be doing it underneath the lights of the cameras and all these things. So for me, I wish that more of our athletes just felt as though the people supported them, but didn't feel as though, they're getting critiqued for just little things. Because I think it's hard enough to do what they're doing, and it sure is a lot more helpful when they feel everybody's behind them and has got their back.
Yeah, I think that's a hard thing to sometimes always get, but it's because teams lose.
Sure,
and
sure.
you lose, and that's part of it as well, and that's never an easy thing. Dealing with coaches, and obviously confidentiality is front and center on this with the folks that you're talking to. But what's your role with coaches? And I'll start, with Matt Painter in terms of is that a daily interaction? Is that a situational interaction? How does that work for you?
Kind of all of the above. I see all the coaches when I'm at practices and traveling with the team as well. I'll consult with them if they have a question for me, or if they're concerned about someone, they can bring it to my attention, as do pretty much most of our coaches and our athletic trainers too. And sometimes it's just providing psychoeducation to them. We've been doing mental health luncheons where coaches, athletic training staff, like the athletics department is invited, and we kind of talk about various topics and hopefully provide some helpful skills to them too, in terms of how to work with your student athletes better, how to support them.
Yeah, and you've got people in the department that have stressors too with their job. I mean, is that a part of your role as well, if there are department folks, or is it just all driven by student athletes? I mean, do you talk to coaches if they have problems as well?
So we try to keep a little bit of a divide between that, because we want our student athletes to see us as a resource for them, and we don't want to see it as, I think sometimes there could be a concern of, was the coach talking about me?
Yeah.
And so we do keep a little bit of a divide. Now, having said that, I've consulted or I've helped coaches with concerns or questions about things that maybe them or their family are going through. They may ask, what do I do in this situation? Help connect them with different resources or people to work with. I think on our end, it's more of, treating these things, helping people through mental health concerns doesn't have to start in our office.
Yeah.
And actually, I find that it's most helpful when the people outside of us are connecting and helping support and helping destigmatize these things before they even get to us. So for me, it's more about helping them feel supported in a way that they can feel better able to support our student athletes. So my role, I think, is more in that kind of capacity, rather than, I don't sit down as a therapist with one of our coaching staffs.
The difference in males and females, and obviously there's a lot of differences, but in terms of how they approach it, I thought that was interesting in the Forge article that many of you will get a chance to read later, that there's some, men take it differently than women do in this, and how does that approach how does that impact how, and I asked it to both of you, but from your perspective, Brad, how does that work?
Sure. Well, men in general, you engage in help-seeking behaviors less than our women. It's not athletics. That's just nationally. That's an issue that we're always trying to work on. Is how do we connect, destigmatize mental health for men? How do we help them identify that it's something they can work on and it's not a sign of weakness? And so, in general, women are usually socialized in a way that's a little bit more comfortable talking about emotions and how they feel and what they think. So it's usually a little bit less of a hurdle for them to come in and talk to us, although there's plenty of women who still have those same struggles. So part of the thing that, and it's an initiative that we're trying to figure out the best way to approach it here at Purdue, is how do we help, our football team feel like this is a place that's not a weakness to come and talk about these things. And how do we help them see it as, just as if they want to get stronger in the weight room, they go lift a weight. If they want to get smarter or do better in a class, they go see a tutor. If you want to feel better about yourself or perform better, you can come see us. So instead of it seeing as a sign of weakness to come get the support, it's another sign of strength to take on the weight that's in front of you and actually work on it together. So it's a common thing throughout our field that we're always trying to work on, and we haven't found the answer yet. We're working on it, and we're trying to find new ways to connect. Part of the role is I stay with the football team, connected as much as I can. I go to practices, I connect with some of the coaches and the trainers to make sure they know I'm aware of what's going on, and they can kind of come to me when they can. But it's still a work in progress to kind of overcome some of that stigma.
Do you think this generation's getting that, though? That they actually, this may be the first generation of kids that this is going to be part of their healthy person, is mental health is going to be right there with everything else?
I would say definitely more so than past generations. I think it's something that's just going to continue to evolve. People are talking about it more. It's more prevalent, and we're here now talking about this, and I don't know if that would have happened 20 years ago necessarily. It would have been something that's a little bit more hush-hush. And I think just the turnout that we've seen for some of the things we've put on for student athletes and coaches, and just the support that's there, is pretty optimistic. Yeah,
I mean, you talked about the number of people that showed up with all the student athletes at that one time. That's pretty impressive. Recruiting, do you, when prospects are coming to campus in any sport, what role do you play in that in terms of not talking about your services, but also your role within their athletic experience?
So typically, at least from my experience, it's just more about letting them know who we are, what we can provide to them. Most of the time, it's more the parents that are excited about hearing about it. I've had recruits come through, and they're kind of like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll never need this. When the parents, I've had mom come up, it's like, all right, give me your card, I'll talk to you later on about it. So it's usually the parents who are reassured about it. I think some of our athletes, it helps them recognize, like, all right, Purdue is a place I can come where they're going to take care of me in every way, instead of just feeling, I can't get that service somewhere else. And so they know that we're right down there in sports medicine as part of the sports medicine team. I think it just helps parents and the students know that they have the resource available.
I was interested to also, an app. You guys, there's an app for the student athletes that have access to. Talk about that in terms of what they access on that, and how does that help their daily lives? Yeah,
so the app's Headspace, and we were able to just be able to provide that to the student athletes. It's a mindfulness-based app, and we love mindfulness. It's one of the growing areas just in psychology across the board. It's been shown to be really helpful with depression, anxiety, just general life, but then also with sports psychology and performance specifically. And it's really nice because in the app there's just little mini sessions that they can do outside of when they're seeing us. So it's just additional things, again, utilizing that technology, their phones. It allows us to be able to maybe space out or see them not as frequently, so we can also serve more of the student athletes. And it just provides a wide array of services, which is really helpful too.
But is it literally a list of things they should be thinking about? I mean, that could be part of it. Here's something that you ought to be in your wheelhouse.
It's all there's some videos on there for like visualization, but a lot of it is just guided breathing meditation, basically. And you can choose how long you want to do it for in the various topics, but it'll just kind of walk you through and how to focus on one thing. And that's really helpful if you think about whether it's shooting a putt, shooting a free throw, trying to make a catch, or focusing. There's a lot of things going on at game time, meet time, and it's helpful to just be able to dial in and think about one thing. Same thing, test anxiety. If you're, oh my gosh, people are getting up, things are wrestling, I don't know this one question, it's just focus, take a breath, focus on the one question, and then move forward.
are you available to next week? I mean, no, I mean, it's just great stuff, because to me, that's the hardest thing for all of us to do. And I can only think of these 18 to 22-year-olds that have a lot of things on their plate. I mean, it's a very challenging life, because there just is a lot of stress.
Well, I mean, that's things like anxiety, depression, a lot of that, what that is your mind is pointed somewhere else,
Yeah.
right? Anxiety is usually because you're looking to the forward or looking to the past, worrying about what may happen or what did happen, right? And so a lot of the work that we try to do with our athletes is to try to just bring them into now. Because now is manageable. You
Yeah.
can take care of now, you can do something about now. If something's not okay, you can't do something about tomorrow right now, and you can't do something about yesterday right now. So that's a lot of the work we do, and we use things like Headspace because it gives another tool, another sort of series of things they can do in between the sessions that we do. When I was originally trained, apps, again, I'm not that old, but
Yeah.
apps and those type of things didn't exist. So what we used to do is we used to record it,
Yeah.
burn it onto a CD or MP3s or whatever. And no one really wants to listen to my Northeast accent, the Ohio
It's not
accent.
too bad.
It's not too bad.
Yeah.
But I mean, the gentleman on the Headspace app has this very calming,
Nice.
pleasant, British
accent.
accent. And so
That
like
works.
he's a lot more pleasant to listen to practice some of these things. And as Kelsey said, we've had students now who've come up and said like, hey, I don't really need to come in because I started doing this and now I feel a little bit better. Or I've had students where we practice it for an hour a week, but they have all the rest of the hours of the week they need to find time to do it, and they'll use things like that app or other tools that we have to help them take care of themselves in between the appointments.
Yeah, and we're down to a couple of minutes here, but Boilermaker Brave, I believe is the right term. Tell me a little bit about that, because it's an interesting initiative from the student-athlete perspective.
Yeah, so a couple student athletes wanted to develop a source of support for mental health for the student athletes. And so right now it's kind of a mixture between like a sport group, and then we also provide some skill-based learning as well. But they meet, I think we've had 3 sessions so far this year, just kind of on a monthly basis with various topics. But the goal is to just have another space where students can get together and kind of share their experiences and struggles, learn that they're not alone, and then also learn from each other too. And the research shows, like, for the college-age population, group therapy, group format is just as, if not more effective than individual, and it, again, frees up our schedule a little bit if we can get more people talking about it and learning from each other too.
Yeah, you have to be careful this, because if you offer too much, I mean, you want to do this, but you don't have enough time in the day.
Sure.
That's part, you got to be a challenge in your job.
Yeah, we always talk about it's a good problem to have,
Yeah.
right? When we feel that there's like more demand that we can keep up with, that means we're doing our job in terms of, one, they see us as a quality resource for them, and hopefully that means word of mouth is getting around that we're being a good resource to our student athletes. And then that's why we're trying to find things like the Boilermaker Brave, is that we're trying to find opportunities for our student athletes to feel supported by each other. And at least from my experience, nothing destigmatizes mental health more than a fellow student athlete.
Yeah.
That's why I love the pro athletes
Yeah.
who come out, like the stories like Kevin Love and those
Yeah.
coming out and sharing their experience. Nothing makes that more normal than those people who have achieved at the highest level sharing their experience. So yes, we have that problem. We do. We run into that. We
Yeah.
do our best to get people in as often and as fast as we can. But I'm okay with that problem. That means that we're just going to have to keep figuring out how to expand it and take care of them.
Yeah, and I think that that's an unbelievably important service. Last question on injuries, and there's a psychology, there's certainly a lot to deal with when and I'm just using him as an example, and we're not talking about him specifically, or Rondale Moore, or somebody that nobody, it's tough to deal with that, whether you, no matter what the situation is. Is some of your emphasis there? Do you see kids that have had that problem or trying to work their way through that? Is that a fundamental issue that you see more of than maybe anything else?
Yeah, it's really common, actually.
Yeah.
Probably a big part of the work we do is athletes coming in and coping with injury, the missing of the time. A big one is returning back to sport, and a lot of our athletes struggle with, well, 6 months ago I could do this, and now I'm struggling to be able to do that same way. So helping them, one, normalize and trust in their body, trust in their ability to come back. And then there's even on the bigger end, it's dealing with those traumatic injuries, those things that maybe change the route of their career, maybe it ends their career, and how that affects their identity, how that affects their experience of sport, and how to help them heal, not only physically, but emotionally. How do you heal from that? If you are going to come back, how do you overcome maybe that fear or that reluctance to get back to full participation? And if you're not, how do we help you make sure you transition into a healthy way to the next place in your life or the next phase of your life? So it's definitely really common.
Yeah, I mean, you can relate also from your student athlete experience, but again, that's the thing that's just, you add that to the list of academics, but if you're dealing with injury, that's just another huge challenge.
And sometimes with that, there's more time in the training room too.
Yeah.
So how do you fit that into the schedule as well, on top of practices, classes, studying?
Yeah, well, this is, again, one of my favorite topics, and we will do this again. We'll try not to do it every week with them, because they have other things to do, but we
Do
do
a call-in
appreciate-
line, or?
Yeah, we can do that. I'd be happy to have you on speed dial anytime, but we appreciate it so much. It's a fascinating topic, and we just scratched the surface, and there'll be much more to learn about this, but I do think it's, if college athletics is going to do service of building young men and young women to top and high-performing people, this has to be a part of that. And I think that's, I give you guys a lot of credit for all your expertise and what you bring to the table. All right, I want to thank our sponsors today, Hilton Garden Inn, Trent Johnson, State Farm agent Trent Johnson, and of course, Triple X on the hill, but on the levels, Purdue tradition since 1929. And Brad and Kelsey, also for your time today, we appreciate that. We will have a show next Friday before the Indiana game. It'll be at 1 o'clock, and we'll look forward to talking all things Purdue Indiana football. That will be a big one as well, and a lot of things to hit on that. I want to thank Steve and Gordon and Wes and everybody, I think maybe even Scott in the back room, that's helped us make this work. And we wish you all a happy Thanksgiving and a safe one as well. And we'll look forward to seeing you next Friday on Gold and Black Live.